Well, hello there. I'm going to give a short demonstration of how I might do a poetic analysis of Psalm 8. And as before, I want to emphasize there's some sort of an art to it where we just use the tools, the poetic devices, and just use it to help us understand the psalm better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is share my screen to Psalm 8. And again, I apologize that the thumbnail guess of me is really itty bitty. If you have a way to figure that out, I'll be all ears. Okay, and then here is Psalm 8. And again, we picked a more of a literal text. It's just NRSV. And as before, just read through a few times to get a first impression. But this time, what I did was I copied Psalm 8 into a Word document, and then I separated the lines myself. I took out the verses so they wouldn't bias me into the versification into stanzas and trophies. And then where I think you might have colons, I went ahead and put, you could see the double slashes there. So that was my own thinking of how the poem might be divided into lines. And so in Psalm 8, I put each line on, that I think might be a line in the psalm. And then again, the devices, one thing I might look at is inclusio. And then here is where the first line right here is identical to the last line. And so we do have in inclusio, but what is being repeated is actually a very specific device. It is what we will call a refrain. And a refrain, you might think of something like a chorus to a song that's repeated. And so you can see the first and last line is one whole line repeated as a refrain. And already the refrain is signaling to me what I might be thinking of in terms of the tone, okay, or the emotion of the song. And so the idea of the majesty of God in all the earth that's repeated at the beginning and the end make me think of a refrain, maybe a chorus of worshipers. So this is more than just an individual prayer, although it can be prayed that way, but I'm imagining like a choir and singing there at the beginning and the end. So maybe like a soaring, exalted type of music here. Okay, then after the refrain, and looking at the beginning and end of the psalm as a whole, I'll go through line by line and I'll see what we have. And so here we have a bicolon right here into two parts. And so the slashes indicate colon 1 and then colon 2, and then a bicolon means that we have one line right here. So that would be a bicolon. Then as we go line by line, what I want to see is if the bicolon is related to the next line. And so in the next line, I see that we have a shift in topic. So I'm going to pick a different color for this. So in the shift of topic, it seems that we have a colon here. Out of the mouths of babes and infants, you have founded a bulwark because of your foes to silence the enemy and avenger. So this seems to have two bicolons, and then they're related because of this term here, like cause and effect or something like that. So this seems to be one larger unit here. But then when the next line, we see a shift to the heaven, and so there's a change in topic. So I'm going to shift to a different color here. And so I see, okay, when I look at your heaven, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, I can see we have two bicola, and they seem related, where the first colon, if we label it A, which is a typical way to do it, and then B for the second part, then if it's parallel, then the second would have an element repeated. And here we know that the repetition is in the same sequence. So I'll put an A prime, B prime to indicate that. And so, so what this looks like right here is AB that's repeated again, but the relationship between the two, so for example, A is the heaven, but then A slash is moon and stars. And then B, the work of your fingers, but B slash, you've established the moon and stars. So it seems to be not so much a repetition of the same thing, but perhaps a something like a development. So I would call that parallelism, perhaps a development, where the first bicolon is generic. I look at the heavens and then develop, and then in detail, I see the moon and stars. Okay. Then we have a shift to another topic. What are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them? And we see a different topic here, human beings and mortals, that's a shift from the heavens and the stars. And again, I want to look at the parallel element. So the first bicolon, remember bi means two, so the first part would be human beings, and then the second part, you are mindful, and that would be AB. And then the second line, I see that mortals matches with A, and then that you care for them, B prime. And then so you can see how those two are addressing, the same topic. So we have another case of a parallel element here. And to here, it seems to me that this would be synonymous parallelism, because it's saying the same thing. The second line is not developing or adding new information, it's restating. So human beings is restated as mortals, that you are mindful of them is restated that you care for them. So the parallelism is synonymous here. And then we seem to shift to another topic. And you can see the pattern here is just bicolon, bicolon is two parallel lines. And then we have another bicolon, bicolon, and then another bicolon, bicolon. And then it seems like we're following the same pattern. So here we have two bicola, and again, with the elements are similar. So A, you have made them, and then A prime, you have crowned them. B is lower than God, B prime, with glory and honor. And so again, we can see that the elements are similar, but in contrast to the synonymous in the one above, there seems to be more development, like in the green, where that you made them a little lower than God, but then more detail given. Okay, so you gave them a crown, you've given them glory and honor. So it seems to be development here, giving more information. And then the next two lines again seem to be a package deal as well, right here, that you have given them dominion, A, over the works of your hand, B, and then you have put all things, be A prime, under their feet, and the B prime. And again, you can see how the elements correspond to each other there. And there seem to be synonymous, because if you note A and A prime, it's almost saying the same thing. you've given them dominion, you place all things in the work of your hand under their feet. So that seems to be restating the same thing. So this would be synonymous parallelism. And then the pattern seems to be broken because instead of a bicolon, we seem to have a tricolon here. So in the tricolon appears to be a listing. And so this would be B, B and C. And then, oh, actually, I think I skipped the sheep and the oxen. So let's class that. And again, you see, it's just sort of playing around with the text. I really love the iPad because I can erase much easier. Kind of like the way God forgives sin to make them white as snow. I can just erase all the blemishes here. Okay, so we have a bicolon here. Sheep and oxen, beasts of the field. And then the next is a parallel line, which is obvious, but then the parallel line appears to be a tricolon. So we have an A prime, B prime, and then perhaps C. Okay, and so the things parallel. So sheep and oxen, beasts of the field, that appears to be focused on the land. So that's the bicolon there. And then at the bottom, birds of the air, fish of the sea, but then the third element, whatever passes along the path of the sea. So we seem to have air and then sea. So we have land, air, and sea. Yep. And so it seems to be a listing of the different kind of living non-human creatures in the three domains of creation, land, air, and sea, that is expanding all things under their feet in right here. So that seems to be fleshing that out there. Okay, so then I look at the whole and see how maybe how the whole psalm could be divided into a larger section that we might call stanzas. So obviously the inclusia would be a part as maybe the beginning and end refrain. And so if I were to label like the outline, you know, so I would label something like, okay, this is Roman numeral 1 at the beginning. Then I see you have such a glory above the heaven. That's just all by itself. And that seems to be a separate section right here, which is number 2. And then I could see with the color coded how, so out of the mouths of babes and infants, and then your foes, the bulwark and the enemy and the avenger, that seems to be a third section right here. So at the beginning, we have 3 separate sections that are different in topics. However, when we start here, the next section, when, we see how each parallel section, like the green had to do with the heavens, okay, and the stars, and the yellow had to do with human beings, the blue also had to do with human beings, and then the red and the black had to do with the animals. So everything here, from the wind all the way down to here, seems to be one long section 4. And then we end with the refrain in section 5. And so I kind of see how the Psalm 8 is organized, and that's in both, and it's uneven. So we have a short refrain. We seem to have maybe the theme that is just emphasized, you know, your glory is above the heaven. That's the starting. And then we have a very short section about the sanctuary, that that God had made, maybe a creation that they played made after defeating enemies. And so we seem to have a focus on maybe creation following a period of calamity, of chaos. And so that's a very common motif of creation we find all over the Bible. But note that it's really short. It seems to be backed up that the God's glory is above the heaven, and then from above the heaven, God created a safe place, a sanctuary after silencing the enemy and the vengeance. Then the meat is part 4, and it's all about, and it seems, the cosmos under the heavens. And if you look at the structure, it talked about the heavens, and then it talked about the animal kingdom, but in the middle, the heart is human being. And so we can see how this middle section right here is what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them. You made them a little lower than God and crowned them with glory and honor. So that seems to be the kernel here, everything that's going down to the human being. But I want you to note another device is repetition. Note how glory right here tied in to glory up here. Okay, so so we see how the main theme of the psalm, you have set your glory above the heaven. It's just short. This is the reality. And then the glory of the heaven, we have a downward movement. Heaven down through the star, down through mortal, and then under their feet to the animals. And the glory from above is delegated to below. So humans appear to be portrayed as almost like a vice deity. And this is where it's very fascinating, a little lower than God. So above the created world, under your feet, right? So what's interesting is when I think of the spatial reference of the song, is creation is the work of God's hand. And so you see the hand right here in the green. But then we see feet for a human, right? So we get this idea of glory in the hands of God bestowed upon human, and then setting all things, which we see the sheep and the land, air, and sea creatures in the green, it's all being placed by God under the feet of humanity. And so what I'm visualizing is a human being, and then God above giving glory to the human, and then God above is putting everything under the human. So human being is the nexus of creation, God above and the animal kingdom below, and then it ends with the refrain. So again, this is just a demonstration of how just getting the tools. And it's not about, no, you get everything right. And I know for sure that a number of these lines can be divided differently. But the main point is using the tool, even as imperfect as it is, it's forcing me to get into the text, to analyze the nuts and bolts, and to allow the text to convey what it wants to convey, not only in terms of the message about the glory of God, what it means to be human in the created world, but also the affect, the tone, the soaring tone that I'm hearing of how majestic God is, and the awesomeness. And so I'm thinking of noise here as well, because the mouths of babes and infants, you think about the sound that babies make, right? And so I'm thinking of the sound that babies make, even from incoherent babbling. God uses that to create a sanctuary, a place of safety, the bulwark. God uses the babbling of babies and infants to create protection from the enemy and the avengers. And how much more would the more coherent, artful language of Psalm 8, how much more would that creation continue to create a safety, a sanctuary? So here I'm thinking of liturgical theology, and what this means is because Psalm 8 is meant to be sung and prayed not only individual but in corporate settings of worship. The thing is that our cries, our praise, that language is creating the reality. Our cries make a difference with God, from babe all the way to human beings. And so the very songs we sing and the prayers we pray, it's creating the sanctuary. And the word sanctuary comes from the Latin sanctus, which is holy place. And so that holy place is created by the very act of worship of Christians coming together. So it's a very profound idea of worship. And then what I want to do now is just quickly alert you to a couple of other levels of understanding the Psalms, in addition to all the poetic devices that I've established. Something else you want to do is maybe pick out maybe some words in the translation and see how it's translated elsewhere. Okay, now what I want to do is, I apologize for all the myths, so I'm just going to quickly erase all of this, and then maybe try to note some key words I might want to pick up. But one word might be bulwark, which I don't use the word bulwark that often, so I might want to know more about that. Also, I'm really curious about the little lower than God, perhaps. That might be one. I mean, that might be it. There may be others that you can look at, but you want to pick like little lower than God. Then really what you do is like what we did earlier in class, is use online resources to be able to compare. So this is Bible Hub for Psalm 8. And then if I just want to go down to that verse, which they make him a little lower than God. And so here we are. And then you can see, for example, what I like about this is they already classified modern translations, classic, literal, Catholic, Aramaic. It's just too many. But you can quickly go through and see the different translations. So for example, the NIV, they translate a little lower than angels. You can see that there. New Living Translation is God. English Standard Version is heavenly beings. You can see that. Angels, God, angels, heavenly beings. And so what we're already seeing the translations, as you can get, even if you don't know Hebrew, it just means that the word Hebrew for God can mean different things, and the context is not completely clear on what precisely it meant. Part of that is poetry. Sometimes words are chosen because it can have more than one meaning at the exact same time. That's the art of poetry. And it can also be called, that's just how language works there. So that kind of helped to explain what that means. And you think, okay, how do I decide on the translation? Well, number one, no translation is perfect because these are all translators' best educated guess for understanding this, and that's true. And then inspiration is just God communicating something through the finite vehicle of language. It's never going to be 100% clear. But I think what stands out to me is the name of God is used in the refrain right here. And that name is Lord our Sovereign. and it's using God's personal name. And if you know, it's the direct address, yours. So Psalm 8 is direct to second person, just that second person, you to God. And that's unusual if you look at all the Psalms, and this would be considered a hymn of praise. And you think, okay, I want to see how many hymns of praise there are. So you start with Psalm 1, and you go to Psalm 150. That's a really good exercise. But you'll find out Psalm 8 is the very first hymn of praise you find in the Psalm. Because Psalm 1, right, it's a wisdom song. Psalm 2 is a song of Zion, of God's anointed one. And then we have Psalm 3 to 7 are songs of lament, okay, and things like that. Psalm 8, the first song of praise. But then most of the songs of praise and the songs to it is not second person, third person. You know, praise God, praise the Lord, all that. So this seems to be really unique in addressing God as second person. Not only does that help us understand how special Psalm 8 is as a hymn of praise to God using God's personal name, to me it sheds light on lower than God. That probably the Hebrew word, it's hard to say, you God, you Lord have made them lower than you God. Seemed a little awkward. So it may be better to see this as a little lower than the divinity, perhaps. Now the word for God is literally plural, the word for divinity that it's used, it's a generic. And in other places in the Bible, it's used for angel, divine being. It's not really precise. And so it's a view of creation of God as Lord, the heavenly beings, like in Job 1, we see the divine council. So we have the heavenly being, divine council. So God, the divine being, and then under the divine being is human, and under the human is the animal realm. So that's really the approach when you see differences in the English translation. Then you want to go back to the context to help you determine how that might be understood. And again, I think you can say, okay, you know, that really helped us understand what's going on. But at the end of the day, we can see how the general point of Psalm 8 is not stand or fall with how that one word is translated there. Okay, so that's kind of my takeaway there. But I think to enhance your Psalm study, as you're doing Psalm 46 and later, you might pick a word or two and then compare with other versions there. For example, the phrase "be still" might be something you might want to look at, because it might not mean what you think it means if you look at that very carefully. And then the second is, you know, how is that song, what is the concept of this psalm in light of the other psalms around it? So Psalm 8 is the first hymn of praise that we see in Psalm 1. Okay, and it's the only one, as far as we know, that is addressed to God in the second person. So Psalm 8 certainly quite important. Okay, well, that's it for today, and thank you for listening, and hoping that this just shows you maybe one way of analyzing it, and again, you adopt whatever is helpful to you. The main thing is just keep doing it. Psalm after psalm, poetry after poetry, and then you'll just be amazed how much detail you'll see that you haven't really observed before, because we tend to read maybe too quickly or not at all. If we learn to slow down, it really becomes a rich way to understand more about God. And with that, I will say farewell, and looking forward to your analysis. Adios.